This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Hello, difference makers. You are listening to A World of Difference. This is a podcast for the people who still believe that how we lead matters, that the conversations we have across difference, across cultures, across the distance between where we are and where the world needs to go can actually change things. I am Lori Adams Brown, and for over 5 years, I have been bringing global leaders, authors, and change makers to one table. 155,000 downloads, 800 countries, a top 3% podcast, and one conviction that has not changed. The right conversation at the right time with the right people shifts everything. If you are here, you are already a difference maker. And if you want to go deeper, the Difference Makers community is waiting for you at patreon.com/a world of difference. $7 a month, the price of a latte, bonus conversations, voting power, and a seat at the table where this conversation continues. The link is in the show notes. And welcome to this week's episode. I hope it inspires you. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Hi, it's Lori. I'm taking a real break this July, my first proper one in a while, and instead of going quiet, I wanted to leave you with something better than just reruns. This month, I'm running an encore series I'm calling Leading Through Change. 4 conversations, one every week, chosen because I think they're the ones that I still think about all this time later, the ones people write to me about, the ones that changed how I lead. First up is Allison Shapira, an opera singer turned executive communication advisor who wrote the book on using AI without losing your voice, literally. Her idea that the human isn't just in the loop, the human is the loop, has stayed with me since we recorded this, and it feels more relevant every month that passes. 3 more conversations are coming your way over the next 3 Wednesdays. And so if you're new here, hit follow now so you don't miss them. And if this one lands for you today, do me a favor and send it to one leader in your life who needs to hear it, and maybe 4 other managers in your workplace. That's the best gift you can give this show while I'm off recharging. Have a great July. Hi, Allison. Warm welcome to you there in DC on today's A World of Difference podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Hi, Lori. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk about travel and what you're writing about and AI and so many different things. But I wanted to start off with a little bit of travel because that's so fun and we love talking about it. And I know that travel can be something that really transforms us. It's educational. It enriches us. It gives us innovative ideas. It helps us learn. But I want to know from you specifically, how did you use travel to find your own authentic voice?
I've been using travel my entire life in order to enrich my voice. And there was one moment where it actually helped me find that voice. And that was about 13 years ago. I had my own business on the side teaching public speaking, but was always afraid to launch it full time until I was offered a job at a consulting firm, which would have doubled my salary and given me financial independence for the first time in my life. And based on a gut feeling, I wound up quitting on the 3rd day with no backup. And so with all the options that I had, I decided to put everything I owned in storage and go to Europe with a travel guitar. And I wound up performing on street corners and in bars and all over Europe and crashing on friends' couches throughout the journey. So it was this incredible experience. I wound up realizing that I needed that time out in my life in order to find my voice musically as I started to write songs that could process what I was feeling. And then to also take a time out in my life where I could ask myself, who am I and who do I want to be? And it's only by leaving our normal routine that we really challenge ourselves to see who we are.
It's such a great message right now because some people find themselves being ousted from their companies for having a voice in or outside of work, whether they've asked a question and that somehow hasn't been something that their organization or company wanted. They just don't want to be questioned, or whether it's, they might be posting something online on LinkedIn outside of work and the company ousts them. We're hearing more and more of these stories as we sort of wrestle with companies that, as an organization, some companies have this sort of narcissistic personality where being questioned isn't allowed increasingly in this time. And so I think it's so important to know our values as a leader. In fact, I keep my values here on my desk because it's my filter. And I think increasingly in a generation and in a time of an AI revolution where things are changing, we really have to ground ourselves and know who we are. So I just love that story. It's wild and crazy. And at the same time, taking that moment for yourself pays dividends. Sometimes you have to slow down to be able to just really accelerate who you want to be in your career going forward. So, we can definitely, I'd love to talk about some of these themes that are coming out for you. You write about using AI, not to replace your voice, but to amplify it. What does it look like for a leader navigating real-time communication challenges in this era?
Well, I wrote my new book, AI for the Authentic Leader, because as a communicator whose sole focus is helping people find their authentic voice, I realize we have this inauthentic entity that is now entering our work lives in new ways. And I wanted to guide the leaders whom I coach in order to use this new technology in order to bring out their authenticity, as opposed to just outsourcing their emails and their leadership decisions to AI. And certainly you could do both. You could use it to just write the letter for you, or you could use it to make your own voice stronger and even more powerful. And when I talk about authenticity, it's not always good. You can be authentically lazy or authentically unprepared. And so I want leaders to find their best authentic self. And there are specific ways I believe we can use AI for that purpose. And there are also ways as leaders that we need to understand how AI is going to affect the way in which we lead with our values. And I wanted these leaders to understand what was coming so that they could more effectively guide their teams through this time of transition in the world.
Well, indeed, there's so much transition, and we can get really lost and swept up in this whole wave of what's happening if we don't take time to slow down and figure out who we are and even how we think about things ethically, or what guardrails need to be put in place and that type of thing. What are some practical ways leaders can use AI for good to be more present, more human, and not less?
In my book, I talk about a framework I created, the AI authenticity loop. And I use the term loop because in the AI community, we talk about keeping the human in the loop. The point I make in the book is that the human is not in the loop. The human is the loop. And then we bring in AI tools along that loop, but we maintain our own voice in the process. And so that's an important mindset shift that I like leaders to keep in mind as they're using these tools, because a lot of the leaders I work with are afraid of using AI. They're afraid of adopting it because they think it's going to ruin that connection that they have with the people they lead. And I want to show them that it doesn't have to be that way. And so there are tools that we can use that actually help us remind ourselves who we are and who we want to be when we're at our best. And then the AI prompts us to be more human.
It's a great, I just love the reframing, because we say human in the loop all the time here in Silicon Valley and talent development and in all the other parts of AI with our industries here. And I love human is the loop. It really keeps the human-centered aspect of it, which is what many of us who are really trying to be thought leaders around this or have those conversations and say, where are we going? We can't just be passive about this. We have to be very intentional about how we use it. And, there are some concerns about where this could go, even from the very creators of AI itself. And so that is why it's so important to not, as you said, not be just the human in the loop, but to be the loop. I love that reframing. You talk about alignment as more than just a buzzword. We hear it a lot. People need to be aligned. Sometimes it comes from even what I just mentioned earlier about some people who have studied American corporations specifically will say that there is this tendency, increasingly so, of certain corporations becoming more narcissistic and among themselves. And so sometimes alignment could just be everybody needs to get in line and toe the line or capitulate to the leader or whatever. But alignment in its best sense just means we're all on the same page so that we can move forward as a team and be having good communication. So why is it so critical for leaders right now to be aligned?
As you've mentioned, traditional alignment in a corporation is around making sure everyone on the leadership team is in alignment with the strategy or the vision. When I work with leaders on the individual level, helping them build their confidence to be more authentic, we talk about individual alignment. So is the leader in alignment with their values? Are they living their values? Are they speaking and acting in a way that's aligned to their values? So that's where sometimes instead of using the word authenticity, I'll use the word alignment to make sure as leaders we're living our values. Now, in my research for my book, I started to get more and more fascinated by the concept of AI alignment, which is aligning AI systems to human values. And this is where I've started to become increasingly more concerned because individual companies are deciding how to align their language models. And you have a group of individuals making decisions about the values that are being programmed into these AI tools that are then going to not just influence the beliefs, but change the beliefs of billions of people. And I ask myself, what kind of oversight or global collaboration do we want to see? I'm not saying I have the answer to it. I just think one or two engineers sitting in a room should not be determining the values of an AI tool that's going to be used by billions of people who will consider what it says to be truth.
Yes. Something we talk about quite a bit in the corporate board space of one of the values of having, women on boards, even just diversity, cognitive diversity on boards is that it really helps make better decisions as corporations roll out new technologies specifically. So, sometimes people here in Silicon Valley, I'm a part of How Women Lead, and I was on our Get On Board leadership committee last year. And that's our biggest week of the year where we have a lot of, talks and people women who are on corporate boards. It's rich, full of information. And as we discuss some things, some of the conversations are around, what would it have looked like in the year, I don't know, 2007 or 2006 to have, a significant number of women on the board of Facebook or Instagram, and then to say, oh, this is what these algorithms are doing, and have people with an expertise in social psychology to understand, well, as we roll this out years later, we're going to start to see preteen girls on Instagram really start to experience a lot of anxiety. I mean, all the things we're dealing with now, this national epidemic of anxiety among Gen Z, which isn't exclusively related to social media, but is a significant part of it, that sometimes technologies being rolled out, they're not neutral. And how we roll them out matters. I mean, technology is not bad in and of itself. It's good. And it's really neutral, I guess, but it's how it rolls out. And so the conversation at the highest levels in the C-suite, on the corporate boards, and then people writing books and expressing thought leadership, it really matters in this now new era of the AI revolution. How are we doing it? And what is it going to look like 5, 10, 13, 20 years down the road, right?
Right. Right. And one of the reasons I wrote the book, as someone who is not an AI expert, my expertise is leadership communication and human connection, especially in an in-person medium. What I realized is these tools that we're developing, these generative AI tools, are going to affect every aspect of how we live, how we lead, how we govern, how we make decisions. And I realized we can't leave the future to the AI experts. Every one of us has a role to play. People from different countries, different backgrounds with different experiences, and then different areas of expertise from psychology, religious leaders, civil society. Everyone has a role to play. And I wanted to contribute to that global conversation, which is why I wrote the book.
Well, I'm so glad that you wrote this book, and I do agree that we need all those voices. It's sort of the point of our podcast here, bringing people's differences around the table. And I'm certainly glad to be able to dig into your expertise and your perspective. It's so valuable. When you talk about public speaking, and you sort of started off how that was kind of the beginning of our time together. As you mentioned, public speaking was a thing you enjoyed, you were good at. You got this role as a consultant. 3 days later, you decided to go travel around Europe and really understand who you were. But public speaking is at the core of who you are still as a leader. And you say it's never just about public speaking. What do you mean by that? And why does it matter now more than ever?
I'm glad that you asked. And what I forgot to mention at the end of that story is when I came back to the US, I took that side business that I had teaching public speaking and finally had the courage to launch it full time. And so part of that process of finding my voice was learning to trust myself. And now, after over a decade of that, I mean, now that's 13 years later that I've had this training and advisory and speaking business full time, is that every time you speak, you're never just asking a question. You're never just making a statement in a meeting or at a conference. The very act of speaking up is an act of leadership. Because every time you speak, you have an opportunity to change the way people think or feel about an issue, which then can inspire them to take action. And so the reason I say public speaking, it's never just about public speaking, is because I recognize the power in the human voice. When you take what you're thinking and you have the courage to speak it out loud, then what you're doing is having an impact on others. Hopefully, a positive impact on others. And that's what in my work I guide leaders to do.
I wholeheartedly agree. Every country I've lived in, whatever politics looks like in that place, and whether there was a prime minister or a president or a king or a president and a prime minister, I mean, everywhere has their own, version of how they govern and how politics looks. But especially when you have leaders of nations running for office or they're in office, their words carry so much power, and they can sway people and make them feel something, whether it's anger, make them feel that they want revenge, or whether they feel hope or a desire to collaborate with their community and have a collectivist mindset. All of these are able to be swayed at very high levels by politicians. But it just turns out whether you lead a company and you're having a conversation in your town hall about how the company is and the expectations of how people work and setting that work culture, or you're a manager and you have 1 or 20 direct reports, how you speak and that you set the tone and you really can sway people exactly how you said. So, what can leaders do as they're sort of assessing themselves? Even maybe somebody listening right now is a manager in a company, or they are a CEO, or they're considering going into politics. What can leaders do to find their authentic voice when they're really navigating these very high stakes or emotionally complex moments?
Whenever I guide leaders in finding their voice, I start by asking them one powerful question. And this is a question I want them to ask themselves before they craft a message, before they write a presentation, even before they prepare to go to a meeting, whether or not they're on the agenda. And the question I ask them to ask themselves is, why you? And why you doesn't mean why are you qualified, how many years of experience do you have? Those are external validators. By why you, I mean, why do you care about the work you do? about the impact you want to have in the world or in your organization? And when was a moment in your life that made you care? Because when anyone, regardless of whether they have a leadership title or not, when they ask themselves those questions, it brings out this deep sense of purpose and motivation that reminds them their right to speak doesn't come from anyone else. It comes from within. And I've taught this concept of why you all around the world, in so many different regions and countries and industries and sectors, and it doesn't matter where in the world you live. This question is human because it brings out this human desire for agency and for purpose and meaning in their life. And so what I find is when we share that answer, usually it brings up a beautiful story or anecdote that we can put into a speech or presentation. And when we share that, even across languages, it resonates with people because it comes back to fundamental human emotions that help us bond together. So especially if we're speaking to an audience that thinks they have nothing in common with us, then sharing our why you statement with that audience actually creates common ground in even the most difficult situations.
I love that. That is incredible. It's so aligned with the authenticity piece of what you're talking about. But as somebody who does also a lot of public speaking and hosts a podcast and hears a lot of public speakers, both that I interview and that I just, hear at conferences and such, we understand that, 55% of our communication is body language. There's this seminal study by Dr. Albert McRappian that showed this. 55% is body language, 7% is words, and about 33% is that tone or inflection. And I think that really when people start to talk about their why, the tone and the inflection, whatever, even if you don't speak the language, if you hear that tone of how somebody talks about their why and their inflection, that is really communicating something from the heart. And that's such a deeper level of communicating than something they memorized, 7 ways to help you. Right? But when it's the heart, people get it.
It's interesting because that Morabian study has been discussed for decades. And when I was researching it for my first book, what I found out is that it was a study of one person repeating one word over and over again. It's really fascinating. Wow. And so that all of that research and data comes back to how much we infer, not from a sentence, not from a whole message, but from a single word. And I always find that an interesting detail about that study.
That is very interesting. No one's told me that before. Now I'm going to go look it up.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's significant, though. I mean, you could say one word and the tone and inflection be different. And if you speak a language such as Thai, which is where my husband grew up in Thailand and my parents lived there for a while as well, there's 5 tones. So you could say the same word, but 5 different tones, and it has a completely different meaning. Even if you're not, speaking a tonal language, we get tone is different, but certainly in tonal languages. My next question for you is, in your work with executives, what do you think is the most common fear or resistance you encounter when it really comes to integrating AI into their communication? And how do you help them move past that fear?
The reason I wrote my book, one of the reasons, I've mentioned so far several reasons for which I wrote the book. Well, one of the reasons is when I was speaking to the executives I work with, many of them were afraid to use AI. And even one of them said to me, "You know me, Allison, I'm all about authenticity. I don't even want to download ChatGPT." And I responded, you don't actually have to download it. You can use it from your browser. But still, I get the point. And this idea is there's a resistance to using it because people will fear it will make them less authentic and it will negatively impact the relationship of trust that they have either with their teams or with their clients externally. And the truth is, it could. I mean, if you use AI simply to craft a message and you send it without adding in your own voice, it does reduce trust. And so there is a very real danger that if we don't use AI in the right way, it will reduce our human connection. But it's also possible. Like you said, technology can be good, it can be bad. It's all in how we use it. I take an optimistic view that there are ways in which we can use AI that actually bring out our authentic voice. And that's what I want leaders to realize they can do. Because a lot of my work, even before generative AI, before I was using AI overall, a lot of my work was about giving leaders permission to be themselves. Because so often, it's your first time on a corporate board. It's your first time in a senior leadership role. You think there's this role that you're supposed to play. And so you change how you sound and how you act to fit what you think other people expect of you. And a lot of my time, even with the most senior leaders, is giving them permission to be themselves. And so I want them to use AI in a way that brings out their best self. So we're still focused on the same outcome. You bringing your best self to every leadership situation, and especially now with the world changing at an increasingly fast pace, how do we use these tools, whether they're digital or internal, how do we use all tools available to make sure we're showing up as the best leader possible so that we can more effectively guide our countries, our organizations, our family, our communities through this time of transition, really in human development?
I love that. I think that, just as you had mentioned earlier, the human is the loop, right? And so as new information comes out, and I guess some of that information, my personal experiences, I have worked here in a tech manufacturing company and in the hardware aspect of AI. And so, I've been able to hold that hardware in my hands and ask the questions of our corporate social responsibility head and her team, and then our vendors, and say, okay, when this chip goes in here, and then we put this here, and then water comes through, where does it go? And so the water cycles through, most of it recycles through, and then there's this vapor that gets released, and it's a hot vapor that goes into the atmosphere. And as of yet, according to what I understand from the questions I asked of these vendors and the corporate head of social responsibility as we held this thing, no one has yet trapped this vapor that's hot and is being released into the atmosphere. So somebody's going to get really rich when they figure out how to do that, and they're going to use that energy source for something else. And they're also going to save some of the climate impact. But, a lot of this stuff isn't really in the news because who is thinking through that? I certainly don't know. I live in Silicon Valley, and I know a lot of people that work in AI and very, excited about AI, and others who are saying, I'll never use it. There's sort of these two camps. But when we start to talk about our values, our clarity, and our alignment, you kind of talk about how AI should center those rather than just productivity. So could you walk us through maybe a specific example where a leader used AI in this very values-centered way and what the outcome was?
Sure. And there are a couple of things that you mentioned that really struck me, because while I am optimistic about AI overall, I'm also very realistic about the dangers and challenges that we face, including the ones you mentioned. And there's a particular concern that I have that nobody is talking about, but I am noticing increasingly, and that is as we develop AI voices so that they sound more human, we're starting to see AI voices that aren't mimicking the best of the human voice, but they're mimicking a vocal weakness. And I'll give you an example of that. So when I teach public speaking, one of my pet peeves is a vocal phenomenon called vocal fry. And vocal fry is when you withhold, you constrict the air in your vocal cords, but you still talk. And so your voice trails off. And it sounds like this. It's a gravelly, weak sound. Now, everyone does it. Men do it. Women do it. Everyone does it. I hear people pay attention to it more when women do it, but everyone does it. And a lot of people do it at the ends of sentences like this. And I don't do it because I'm a trained singer, speaker, and my focus, my entire life has been focused on the human voice and helping people harness their voice. Well, as the developers of the AI voice assistants are trying to make these tools more human and more relatable, they are programming vocal fry into the voices of the AI assistants. If you listen to the Notebook LM audio podcast, the voice of Alexa 2, I have to whisper it because otherwise it'll
She
activate
hears it.
this.
Yeah.
She'll hear it anyways. But in the newer version of the voice, I'm hearing vocal fry at the ends of sentences. I hear it more in the female voices than the male voices. And the reason this is so challenging and frightening to me is not because it annoys me. I mean, yes, it annoys me, but I'll get over it. What really frustrates me about this is that it's vocally unhealthy. And the more you do it, the more it causes your vocal cords to grate together. It can create nodes on your vocal cords that can require surgery and lead to you losing your voice. So I'm very concerned about it. And people's children are going to grow up with AI companions. They're going to mimic the voices of those companions. We all do. It's called linguistic contagion. That's how we develop regional accents, by picking it up from the people around us. So if children grow up with AI companions, they're going to develop vocal fry because the AI companions are using it. And this means we're literally programming weakness into the voices of the future. And I am on an anti-AI vocal fry campaign to reach the developers who are creating these voices to say, if you're developing these voices, let's amplify the best of the human voice, the power of the human voice, not the weakness and frailty of it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. That's the first time I've ever heard that. So I will join you on your campaign.
Thank you.
And if
Please
I meet
join
anybody
me.
working in that, I will definitely connect them with you, because they definitely need people who understand that and are programming it according to the best of us instead of the worst of us. And also, if there's a gender discrimination embedded into it, there's already too much of that in AI already. With, when you put in a man's name or a woman's name and ask about compensation, it'll say, more for the man. But that's just taking data from us. That's on us. That's our fault, because we've not, gender parity has been going back over the last 2 years for the first time. And so it's just, it is taking the worst of us, but it doesn't have to. We can program it to take the best of us. And I really appreciate that conversation. And I will be on the lookout for that, because that is not good. That's not where we want to go. There's a lot of anxiety, though, right now about AI making leadership feel more robotic or detached. So what's your advice for leaders who worry about using AI tools that might undermine their credibility? You mentioned some of this AI slop earlier that we're seeing a lot of, especially people are complaining about it on LinkedIn or in emails, where you see something that's obviously written by AI and it feels a bit detached. How can people really have more practical tools around making themselves feel more genuine in light of that?
Mm-hmm. And the framework I talk about in the book, the AI authenticity loop, is incredibly helpful for that. So that it starts with you crafting your own first draft of the message. And then, yes, you can put it into an AI tool to get feedback on the clarity of the message or how you might reword it. That's where I'm noticing everyone's LinkedIn posts are starting to look the same, because they're all following this very prescriptive formula. Does it capture our attention? Yes. But when I see 4 of my colleagues on the same day use the exact same formula, then it feels less authentic, and I find that I detach more from that message. So once we use AI for feedback on our message, then it's always up to us to come back in and review anything that the AI comes back with a critical eye. Is it authentic? Is it accurate? Of course, to make sure that human touch is there. And then we can get feedback even further with AI on our message. But it always comes back to us to evaluate, am I proud of this message? If this message were written on a billboard in my hometown with my face and name on the billboard, would I feel proud of it? And that's a critical step that I don't think enough people are doing. And one of the dangers that leaders face is, in this evolving era where we can instantly create a video or a message based on our likeness, but without our attention. So a boss can send an avatar to a meeting, or we can send an avatar to a client of us speaking directly to that client. The effort it goes in to record something from a human or write a message from a human will be increasingly seen as more valuable than something automatically generated with AI. And in this future, we'll be able to demonstrate how valuable someone is to us by how much time we spend on the message we send to them. And we'll see this response of going back to human connection. I think we'll do more conferences than ever because we'll be craving that human connection, and because that may be the only time we know if somebody actually said something, as opposed to a deep fake of their voice and words. So I do think we'll see this return to human connection, even as we have these AI tools increasingly making us more and more efficient. We'll still crave the return to human connection.
Yeah. I mean, we're already feeling that crave for human connection, right? I mean, we're just at the very beginning of it, and it's already so important. I'm seeing it in so many spaces where we have, return to offices are trying to solve for it, but even that's not largely working because they're bringing people in largely in a lot of situations to just be on more video calls. And what the point of it was supposed to be actual human connection, but people are in their cubicles and stuck in their offices and still on distributed teams on video calls anyway, because that's the nature of a global enterprise. But I think events like retreats, when people go together and spend time together, even if it's just simple, going to the redwoods here in California or spending time by the ocean, people are just craving nature, humanity. And I do agree that we're going to lean more into that. You've really built your career, though, on helping leaders build confidence in their communication. How has this introduction of AI changed the nature of that sort of confidence building piece of your work? And are there new skills or mindsets that leaders really need to develop now in light of this?
Leaders definitely need to learn, how do we integrate AI into our workflow in so many ways. My focus is on communication because that's my expertise. Certainly, they need to learn how to use it across all different aspects of their work as well. And that's what companies are figuring out. One of the challenges I see leaders face right now is that when generative AI first came out, these large companies banned it and said, don't use it. You're not allowed to use it at work. If you do use it on your own time, on a personal computer, no company data. Now, these same companies are rolling out AI initiatives and changing their tune to their leaders and saying, okay, everyone on board with AI, and you're going to be our champions, helping everyone in the company adopt these new tools. And so there's this gap between what they were told before, what they're told now, and their skill set and comfort level. And again, one of the reasons I wrote the book is to help bridge that gap so people can become more comfortable on an individual level. It will ultimately be up to us to determine what feels authentic to us and where do we draw the boundary between acceptable AI use and unacceptable AI use. And where I like to draw the boundary is, personally, I ask myself, would I go to another person for help on this? If I would go to another human, I feel comfortable asking an AI. I mean, certainly recognizing the AI might hallucinate or fabricate information, but the concept is, if I would accept help from a human, I feel it's acceptable to accept help from an AI with my own oversight and guardrails. But if it's not acceptable to ask a human to do it, then I don't know if it's acceptable to ask an AI. For example, if I'm going to ask a human to write a speech for me that I have to deliver, and yes, we have speechwriters. It's a beautiful profession. A lot of the times it's easier for you to do it yourself because then it comes from your own words and voice and it's easier to remember. So for those who can't afford a speechwriter, they don't have that kind of senior role that comes with a speechwriter, I would say don't use AI for that. Use it to give you feedback on what you write, but let the message come from you first. It will be more authentic and easier for you to ultimately deliver. And I was at a professional speechwriters conference a few days ago this week, actually speaking about AI for speechwriters. And one of the speechwriters said, writing is thinking. when we're writing a message, we're thinking about the message, we're evaluating it, we're using critical thinking. And when you outsource the writing process completely to AI, what the AI sends you is this document that's devoid of your thought process, which makes it less authentic. So that's where I draw the line. It's if I would accept help from another person, great, I'll ask the AI. If I wouldn't, then I feel like that's something that I should probably do myself.
That's great advice. I think that, I have certainly been using AI for a while now as more of a brainstorming partner, an extra person on our team. For me, I've used ChatGPT some, but I've really leaned more into Claude on the Anthropic. And, I've made a project on there where I've put in, a lot of us in professional world have been assessed multiple times of different assessments. So I've put into a project where it's got my Hogan assessment, it's got my Strengths Finder, the Gallup Strengths Finder, it's got my Enneagram, my Myers-Briggs,
Wow.
my Berkman, and it knows me and it has my resume. And then as I do projects, I'll, start off with some thoughts, like a really good prompt, such as, here's some things I'm thinking about. I want to talk about this. And not just write me a speech or write me a thing, but I give it a lot of, so it knows me and then it's worked with me over time to where it really is kind of like a partner that's been with me. And so it kind of starts to learn your authentic voice and who you are. And it knows my values. Like I just, it can be scary because it's like, well, that's a lot of information out there. And I think the unfortunate reality is we live in an era where AI is gonna know us regardless. If you have an Alexa, if you have Siri, I mean, we've already been using AI for a while in different ways, and so I completely understand people who just never want to use it at all. But most people are using it and they don't realize it, and so I think just the how is the important question, along with where is this going, and then some of the climate impact implications that we really do need to solve because these data centers, it's a big booming business. There's more and more of these coming out. And so we do need to sort of have that at a high level to understand as each of us uses it and we, generate a picture with generative AI that uses a little more water than just the words. We need just that education piece, I think, is important. But I think really what you're doing is incredibly important of helping us think through it, have us be the loop, and that's the way forward. So thank you for sharing your insights today. Thank you for writing this book. Are there any last minute things you want to say? And then also let us know where we can find you.
Yes, I would love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post quite frequently there, and it's a great way to reach out to me. I also welcome people to visit my website at AllisonShapira.com. And for the AI, for the Authentic Leader page that's there, you can actually download a resource that has some extra tools that I talk about in the book and also an authenticity GPT that I created. So it's through ChatGPT, and it's a tool that helps you find your authentic voice in dialogue with this chatbot. And so it's a tool I invite people to play around with to see how an AI can help you bring out some stories and experiences from within that you can use to harness and become a more powerful, more authentic, more effective leader. Regardless of where in the world you are, it will tap into that human sense of purpose we all have.
It's lovely. Thank you so much, Allison, for being on the show today, for the difference you're bringing to the table and the difference you're making in the world. It's really exciting. And everybody go reach out to Allison on LinkedIn, go read her writing, go listen to her speaking, and check out that GPT that she's provided for you. Thanks so much for being on the show, Allison.
Thanks, Lori. A pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, difference makers, for being here. Not just for listening, for being the kind of person who shows up for conversations just like this one, because you believe the world gets better when we understand each other more. And that is who difference makers are. And you are one of them. There are two ways to go even deeper. On Patreon at patreon.com/aworldofdifference. For $7 a month, you get bonus conversations and community. $25 gets you into the room where the real talk happens, live every quarter with me directly. On Substack, paid subscribers get full essays, no paywall, and a monthly live conversation where I say the things I can't say anywhere else. Links to both of those are in the show notes, and I would love for you to join me in both of those places. If this episode stayed with you, share it with 5 people you know who need this right now. That is how we grow this. And that is how we grow ourselves at the same time. I am Lori Adams Brown. Until next time, difference makers, go keep making a difference.